Hey, welcome to the Star Wars Unlearned Podcast. My name is Josiah Schuett, and I'm joined by Nathan Hawley. What we're doing is we're looking at Star Wars from the perspective of its creator. So we're turning off our fan brains and really just trying to uncover the story that Lucas is trying to tell. We're in the middle of our series on Attack of the Clones, where we explore the filmmaking, the history, the mythology, and everything else that Lucas and his team used to bring this second chapter of the Star Wars saga to life. So join us as we dive in and unlearn what we have learned about the Star Wars story.
Well, let's do it, my friend. We're basically introduced to the Jedi Council here for episode 2. Or I should say not the council, but there's a lot of council members there. So, you want to bring us in? Set us up?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this scene last time, but we'll get back into it again. Mostly we were kind of talking about just the different characters. We talked about CGI Yoda. We talked about the aesthetic of the scene, and so I can get into the dialogue here. Because we start off with Palpatine talking about, maintaining the Republic that has been in place for 1,000 years. And it's so interesting that that's his first line, because it's the exact opposite of, what he wants to do, what his plan is. He wants the Republic to be split in two. And I also think it's interesting that the timing of it, the Republic has been in place for 1,000 years. And it's also the exact amount of time that the Sith have been in hiding. And so there's this inextricable history between like the Sith and the when the Sith are around, you don't get a Republic, you don't get the nice galaxy. But when the Sith show up again, that's when when the Sith are gone, then we have this 1,000 years of peace with no war, and the Jedi are keeping things together. And so it's I don't know if it's a hint of how things are going to get torn down, because it's pretty obvious that it's the Sith are the bad guys, but it's interesting cyclical idea that this is something that's happened before, where the Sith have undermined democracy in the past, and once they went away, then we were able to have it again. And so, so I just like that time period is the same, the 1,000 years.
Yeah, that's cool.
The millennia without the Sith was the millennia of peace, and once the Sith come back in a big bad way, and then the next movie, then that's when we start a new era, which is the Empire. So, so I just like that little pairing there of those two ideas. And then the fact that he's saying the precise opposite. His first line is a lie, and that's just great for Palpatine.
Yeah.
Or it's a deception, not so much of a lie, a blatant lie. What he's saying is true, but it's coming. They don't know the mouth that's speaking it is they don't know that it's actually a Sith behind it all.
From a certain point of view, right?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, it was good. George, I was listening to the commentary on this scene again, and he said he wanted to introduce a couple things. One was that the Jedi are peacekeepers, more of a police force than an army. And, Mace says that pretty much, saying, we're just peacekeepers, not soldiers. And then that they're overwhelmed. But also that Palpatine here is moving them on the chessboard. He's moving them to find the clones. That's his goal in this movie, is I need the powers now. And I'm setting it up. I appreciate that perspective, and George is kind of acknowledging, Palpatine here, he's always in the shadows. He's the Phantom Menace, right? He's just pulling the strings and leading them on and saying, here, I'm going to set this up so you find the clones today. That's the goal here. That's the goal with Padme's assassination. That's the goal with, some of the stuff. So I thought that was kind of a neat, I guess just point to what you just said, Palpatine just pulling the strings. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, and that's something that I really didn't think about until really diving into this film for the research for this podcast, is the idea that Palpatine is, from the beginning of this movie, he is maneuvering everyone to find the clones. He wants that to happen. Because in Phantom Menace, there's a lot of things that caught him off guard, and he wasn't in a position of power yet to move everything exactly the way he wanted it to. He had to call some audibles here and there. And he had to, his plan didn't quite go according to plan. But here in episode 2, as we've learned already, and learn in this scene, that the Jedi are really on the back foot here. They're really handicapped. And so Palpatine is free to as you said, to move his pieces on the chessboard without they're not fighting him. He's not getting any resistance from them. Which I think is interesting, is that we don't see Sidious until the very end of this movie. He is very much in the background. He's not working as much. It's almost like he's not working as hard. Like things are already kind of falling into place, and all his pawns are doing his work for them. Where he was very active in the first one, and at the end of this movie, it's a big surprise. Like, oh, all this is happening, as he said, everything is going as planned. Like it's like the one of the last lines of the movie, and it's
Huh.
this huge revelation as the audience that, oh, it seems like everything's kind of happening randomly. We know there's this conspiracy, like, oh, where the clones come from, who is this Darth Tyrannus, and all this stuff. But at the end, it's revealed like, oh, we're still, not only are we still dealing with the Phantom Menace, again, assuming you don't know that Palpatine is Sidious, not only are we still dealing with that threat from episode 1, but things worked out way better for him now than they even did before. So he's gaining power. There's the sense of dread grows because of that. And I like that that's a kind of a mystery somewhat for most of this. We feel like we might be onto a different villain. Like, it might be like, it's like a villain of the week idea from old serials or from old TV shows. Like, oh, now this week it's Dooku, but actually no, Dooku is serving the um, larger master. So yeah, so I do love that. Uh, yeah, just the manipulation from Palpatine from the very beginning. I never thought about how much more in control and how much more things go to plan, how much more of a victory for the Sith this movie is than the last
Mm.
one.
Yeah, boy, I hadn't really thought about that till the Clone Wars came out, and you really start to see that fleshed out a little bit more and more intentional, but or maybe I should say more front and center, um, where George paid a little more attention to it. Yeah, I never thought about that till you just said that about the end of this, how really don't see Sidious until the very
Yeah,
end.
he never shows up till the end.
Huh. I remember, so when I was watching this for the first time as a kid, I was probably a teenager at this point, but just barely. This stuff went over my head, so I never really thought about it. And and then I got into that phase of life where it was like, yeah, I'm in high school, I don't really do the whole kid toy nerd thing as much anymore. I mean, I always liked Star Wars. I never like disliked it, but it just wasn't on the forefront until I got out of college. It was like, what am I thinking? I love this stuff. Why did I ever put this on the back burner? So I missed a lot of this, and just that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to go through this. Is just to or view it with a new lens, and do a deep dive into Clone or Attack of the Clones. So, and that's one thing I never even picked up on. So I'm just trying to think, like, man, what kind of reveal would have been at the end for a first timer, like not seeing Star Wars before, and seeing like, oh my goodness, this whole thing was planned. That would have been a huge shocker, I would think. A big reveal that went right over my head. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's again that it's this idea that the Sith are not even like mentioned throughout most of this movie. Like the Sith are just not there, and like they were in the last movie. And so like there's a reveal, the reveal that Dooku is a Sith is a huge surprise at the end of the
Yeah. Oh
movie.
man, so true.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and like he's been Count Dooku, so it's just like this evil baron, this evil nobleman, or not. Or at first we don't know if he's evil. He's just opposed to the Republic's corruption, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. But then we realize he has evil intent. He's manipulating people who maybe have better intentions. To achieve his own worse intentions. But yeah, just the fact, and then yeah, that final scene where we see the Sith again, two of them, like we saw in the last movie. We're jumping way to the end, or at the beginning of this movie. We're jumping to the end of this one, but at the end of this movie, you see, yeah, two Sith on Coruscant again. They're at the heart of the galaxy, so they haven't been extinguished. They've been gone. We haven't heard about them from 10 years, but all the dark side growing, everything is kind of pointing to the fact that they're back again. But we don't really see that until the very end of the movie. So yeah, it is a surprise. It is, if you were watching this maybe as a kid, and I don't really remember exactly what my reaction to the progression of the story was as a kid, because I watched all these movies kind of in any given order at any given time. Like I was just watching them all the time, and in any random order. So I didn't really experience them like the way your kids are experiencing or have experienced it, where you were very intentional and you said, we're going to start the story, we're going to go through it, and we're going to show it to you. I just kind of was just took it as a fire hose of Star Wars for, my whole childhood. I just was going crazy with it. So, but if you think about it, yeah, that's a big surprise. It's a big, or maybe it's a surprise. It's more like it's a confirmation of a growing dread, where it's like, I feel like the Sith maybe are still controlling everything, and maybe this is all going downhill. And that's what Yoda says at the end, right? The shroud of the dark side has fallen. We've played perfectly into their hands, and now have got ourselves in a situation that we could have avoided if we hadn't been blinded. So, and we'll talk about that here in this dialogue.
Yeah, that's good. And I think we talked about it last week a little bit, or last time a little too, but just the mystery in this movie. There's a lot of mystery, and I remember up until recently, just even looking at, and we'll come to it obviously, but oh my goodness, what's his name? Newt Gunray. Like when he talks to Dooku in this movie, you don't know if he's with the Sidious or against Sidious, and then you don't really find that out till Revenge of the Sith. Because, in this movie, he's portrayed as like, oh, he was betrayed by the Dark Lord and he came to me, and you're thinking, oh, so is Dooku separate from, I never thought about that with Dooku, but I did think about that with Newt Gunray. It's like, does he know what's going on? Is he following Sidious, or is Dooku just lying, or, it's the mystery of that. But just even till recently. And then we're Friends of the Sith, we see those guys talking to Sidious. So he must have just been lying, but still like, whoa.
Or he could have been led astray by Dooku into a point where I'm back with Sidious again, and again they're too cowardly or too powerless to get out of it again. Maybe they didn't want to fall in with Sidious again, but circumstances led them to that with, Dooku lying to them. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's interesting.
point.
I'd have to trace that thread of the Trade Federation's relationship to Sidious through the Clone Wars and these movies and see what we find. But yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, I like that.
So it's fun to think about and just look at this with fresh eyes, because I've just, like you said, this has been so familiar to me that I'm like, oh yeah, of course Dooku's with, he's Darth Tyrannus. Like we know that, but it's just in story. If you're the first time seeing this, it's like, oh my goodness, that's a big deal. Yeah. So good point. This is great. This is why we're doing it, man. I love to see this stuff. Just learning. It's great.
Oh yeah, always fun. And even just little things like, it's just fun for me to see just how efficient and how effective Lucas is with his writing his screenplay. It's interesting to see his progression of writing. If you look at his earlier films like American Graffiti and THX 1138 and how he progresses through the original trilogy of Star Wars, he had a lot of help early on because he hated writing. He didn't want to write, but his friend Francis Ford Coppola told him, like, if you're going to direct, you got to learn how to write. You got to figure out how to write a story first before you can tell that story. And so he had a lot of help and a lot of writing partners and friends. And so as he went along, though, he got better and better. And so Phantom Menace was the first Star Wars movie that didn't have any help writing on. He did have help writing this one. That's a little side issue, not super important right now, but I do want to get into that eventually. But just the fact that he's gotten so much, he's clearly improved, and he's clearly, I think, gotten much better, that he didn't need all that assistance as he did before. And so just because he's got just little things like here, little housekeeping things, like we learned that in the scene that there aren't tons of Jedi around the galaxy. Like they have a limited number, like only about 10,000, I think is what he says. And so in a galaxy as massive as this one is, it makes sense why people would think they need an army. And so, just little things where you don't have to mention that there's not a lot of Jedi, but I think it's very easy. And even still to this day, a lot of fans have a lot of assumptions about the Jedi, their rank, their power, their influence that can be wrong because they are our main characters. And so we tend to think more of them, or we make assumptions that we wouldn't normally if, say, our main character was a bounty hunter, our main character was just a random citizen in the Republic. So when the Jedi are forefront, we tend to we favor them in almost every scenario, and so we think of them as being this great task force, this huge power, and you can definitely get that sense from the last movie. They're keepers of the peace, so there must be all over the galaxy. It's like, well, you don't need them all over the galaxy if the galaxy is peaceful. The problem is when things start falling apart, that's when the numbers are a problem. And so just little housekeeping things like that, where George is cognizant of his audience and thinking, okay, they need this piece of information to set up why we're having this whole debate about an army, and to show, it's no mistake that the Jedi are shown to be weak in their power, but also in the same moment, George shows that they're weak in number. Like you show, how would I put this? That your character isn't portrayed to be. It's two parallel ideas that are giving you the same information about a character. They're bolstering each other. It's not like the Jedi are doing really powerful in this movie. Oh, but also there's not a lot of them. George's, again, I need to stop saying that. Lucas, I don't know the guy. Lucas says that when they're weak in number, he's also telling us their power, ability to use the Force is diminished and all that, right? So he's hitting on the same note, just in a different key or a different chord. It's it's consistent. It's not the story isn't at odds with itself. It's not like he's very, very cognizant of where we are in the story and make sure that everything is kind of facilitating that. So again, it's we talked about last time. It's no mistake. This is the first time we see the Jedi and the politicians in the same room together, because that's when their relationship is really starting to fall apart. And it's no mistake that the Jedi, the first time we learn there are a limited number of Jedi, is also when we learn they're limited in other ways, and their ability to use the Force. So it's just he's not his brain isn't going off in all these different directions at the same time. He's very organized and everything's kind of moving in the same direction, whether it be like just logistically or just practically the number of the Jedi, but also the part of the problem, their power too. I don't know if that made a whole lot of sense, but that was I don't know. Just I'll just end the ramble before it continues.
Well, I'm going to poke on that a little bit. Do you want to go into that yet, or you want to wait for that conversation with Yoda and Mace Windu when they actually talk about our powers have diminished?
We can touch on it here. I think it'll definitely come up again then. I mean, that line hasn't. I tend to like wait until like the idea is brought up to really have a conversation about it. But
Okay,
what we talked about here, Yoda does talk about impossible to see the future as the dark side's clouding everything. So we can definitely talk about that part of it, I think, because I do have notes about that here, and I do have ideas about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
But so go for it.
Because I just have a ton of questions on that. We've been hinting at that through episode 1. It was like, wait, where are the Jedi in all this, and how are they not using their powers are diminishing? What's this look like? So we can save some of that for that conversation later. But how do you want to approach it now? Because I can't wait to learn, man. I want to know what's going on here.
Well, let's see if I don't know if I'm the teacher here. I don't know if I'm the one who has the knowledge for you, but it is an interesting subject. So
yeah,
Yoda says, or let me set this up right. Palpatine says to Yoda, "Do you really think it'll come to war?" And the first thing Yoda says, our introduction to him in this movie, again, it's always the first thing out of a character's mouth is very important, like it was with Palpatine in this scene. His first line was, the opposite of what he was trying to, what was true. It was a lie. It was a cheat. It was a deceit. And first thing out of Yoda's mouth is this admission of weakness, where he says, "The dark side clouds everything. Impossible to see the future is." So, yeah, the question is, the dark side clouding everything. What is everything? What is clouded? What is the dark side? So it starts out with a very vague statement, as Yoda often does, and then he clarifies it. Specifically, what he's talking about is impossible to see the future is. And we know that's a thing that Yoda likes to do, because Yoda said in episode 1 several times he mentioned the future. Obi-Wan's, one of his first lines is mentioning Yoda's idea of like, I should be mindful of the future. And then Yoda says, "Clouded this boy's future is." And Yoda's very, much danger I fear in his training. Yoda's very much the guy who looks in the future and tries to see what's happening, what's coming down the pipe. And so the fact that he can't do that now is, we've set him up as one of the most powerful Jedi. And the fact that this guy, that's his main thing. That's what Yoda does. And now Yoda can't do the thing that Yoda does. That immediately sets up a threat to every other Jedi underneath him. So from Mace Windu down to the younglings. And so now it's, if this dark side can, whatever this is, whatever is happening, whatever this cloud is, if this can nerf Yoda, then everyone's vulnerable. And so I think it's very important that we started with Yoda. Yoda's the first one to admit that, because it's not a youngling who says, "Oh, it's harder for me to lift this rock," or or Anakin or Obi-Wan struggling. That it starts from the top, very, very top down. And so this isn't just a problem with your faith in the Force, or this, or it's not just Anakin who's having a hard time. Like, all the Jedi are suffering right now. So that's why I think it's important. This is the first point I'll make, is I think it's, again, no accident that it's Yoda who says it, and it's the first we hear about it is from the top Jedi.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because he is I don't know if the epitome is the right word, but he's kind of the pinnacle of the Jedi. Yeah, oldest, wisest. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious though on all the questions you asked earlier, like what is the dark side? How does it cloud things? What's going on? But I'm holding my tongue to see if we need to wait for that conversation. So.
No, you're good. Well, we'll go as far as you want.
Okay.
As far as I can, as far as I'm able. Because I have, again, I do have notes. I didn't have my notes are in chronological order, so the notes on some of those ideas are later on in the movie. But
which is fine.
We're
talk
totally
okay if you want to.
I have no, we can get into it, because I have a quote from Lucas here actually that I want to read. So
Go for it.
This is from Starlog magazine from 2002. It's an interview he did then. And it says, it's not that they can't see the dark side coming. It's just that the dark side begins to envelop everything. It's like walking into a fog. The Jedi's ability to see lessens as the dark side grows. So that's another reason why I love again, he's playing visually and literarily here. What's the word? Literary? I can't. What is that? Anyway, he's playing with words. That can't be right. That sounds too awkward. Anyway, he's playing with words and visuals here. So we started out in the movie visually in a fog, and now we found the Jedi are in a fog themselves. So, like he says, it's like walking into a fog. So I know there's been a lot of speculation about what their ability to use the Force has been diminished. That line comes up later. What does that encompass? Everything? Are they not able to jump as far? They're not able to, what is being diminished exactly? And as far as I've found, Lucas hasn't really ever mentioned any other ability of the Force being diminished other than their Jedi's foresight. So that doesn't mean that it isn't. I'm saying I think that's the primary focus here. And again, that's why Yoda says impossible to see the future is right after he said the dark side was growing and clouding everything. The point the audience is supposed to take away from this is we can't see. We're blind. And that is, that affects, of course, that's going to affect everything around them and all the rest of their powers to some degree. They're not going to know where to focus their time, their energy, and all that. So it affects everything in some way. But aside from, there's a lot of fan speculation and EU and Legends and canon stuff talking about, or that leads people to discuss, okay, how much of the clouding of the dark side, how much effect does that have on their ability to, have a lightsaber fight or a lightsaber, or whatever it is. So as far as I know, I'm saying all I can find so far is Lucas is talking about specifically their foresight in this case.
Yeah. Which makes sense because Qui-Gon set that up in episode 1. That's a big part of their power is that they can see things before they happen, which seems to appear to give them quick reflexes, right? That's what he says. So that would make sense. If you're a Sith Lord and you're going to try and wipe out the Jedi, you got to cloud their vision of the future and make things a little tricky, and lies and deception and what's truth and what's not. And yeah, well, that makes sense. Versus like, I'm thinking something like how high I can jump using the Force, or how powerful I can be in lifting something. You know what I mean? Like if you're a Sith Lord, I don't think that's your biggest concern. Your biggest concern is I need to cover this up so they can't predict it's me or what's going to happen. So that's all Nathan, but I just think that's a really cool observation. Like, well, that makes sense. That makes sense to me as to how that would be clouded, how their ability to use the Force would be diminished. And even in Empire Strikes Back, while you're talking, made me think about Yoda, because he's even asking Obi-Wan about the future still. Will he complete his training? He still wants to know the future. And he talks about Han and Leia suffering, and Yoda says, I don't remember the line he says, but difficult to see the future is, or something like that,
Yeah,
so
Yoda
he's still
changes his tune
always
on
peering
the
into the future.
Yeah, Yoda's he does bring up the future again, but his relationship to that idea is very different in the original trilogy, because he says he admonishes Luke for always looking to the future, to the horizon, like never his mind on where he is now, which is interesting because that's Qui-Gon's instruction to Obi-Wan at the beginning of episode 1. And as we know, Yoda, I forgot to mention this, but this whole idea of Yoda being cut off from the future is what leads him to Qui-Gon. He has to focus on the present moment, and that's what leads him to Qui-Gon. So now Yoda becomes a new Qui-Gon for Luke, where he says, keep your concentration here now where it belongs. It's the same idea of keep your mind focused on where you are, what you're doing. And he's instead of he's what does he says? What does he say? Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future, and he puts less. He still talks about it, and he will he complete his training? It's like Yoda should know whether Luke is going to complete his training, right? Yoda seems to be less sure of the future, or less interested in that avenue of the Force, because it obviously led him to disaster earlier on in his life, right? So. But yeah, it's true. It is fun to see Yoda's arc through, specifically that idea of looking to the future and being blinded or being blindsided by the dark side. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I've never thought about the connection. Like, I've just never really like when I think about the Force, I don't think about future so much. I'm always thinking like power, or lifting or lightsaber fighting. So it's interesting to just now think about this and be like, wow, that's a major piece of the theme, at least in Star Wars, of the focus on the Force, this future stuff,
I
and
would
it
say it's
is
the
interesting.
dominant, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because
that's a
all the
yeah.
prequels is Sidious looking in the future and maneuvering things, and that's Sidious in Return of the Jedi. Like I have foreseen it. He is the dark version of Yoda, and he and Yoda are both sort of these um these the battling prophets, battling not prophets, battling not sooths. What are the whatever the guys that can look into the future? I don't know. There's a word for that. I'm sure that you can't call to mind right now. But anyway, but it
Fortune
really
tellers,
is. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. It's like well,
psychics. Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of. Yeah, whatever it is. But they're
yeah.
seeing off in the. They're both looking off to the future and trying to out. It's a chess game, right? Where they're trying to whoever can think more moves ahead or can see more moves ahead usually wins. And
Wow.
so, and the idea of seeing through the future in the Force that comes up in Empire, like you said, it comes up in Return of the Jedi, and it's a huge. Maybe it's not the driving aspect of the Force that's present in the films, but it's definitely a big one. It's not the most cinematic, it's not the most visual, because we're not seeing visions. We're not. Well, I guess we see Anakin's, but we're not seeing. Well, that's a huge part of Anakin's, right? His whole arc is like failing to see or putting too much stock in what he sees will happen in the future, and that letting that affect his judgment and letting him actually leads him to making mistakes. So it is a huge part of the Force in these movies is looking to the future. The more visual, the more uh, surface, more present aspect of it is yes, like the lifting things with your mind and uh, lightsaber dueling. But I think, it is kind of the aspect of the Force that definitely undergirds this movie, as we just laid out in this dialogue. That's why it's
Mm,
there. Is
hmm
this is going to affect everything.
Wow. Oh man, see, here's my mind blown moment. I love it. This is so cool. I've never thought about that before. Yeah, and it's not just the prequels, right? Like you mentioned, like wow, this is everything. And even in the Return of the Jedi, how the Emperor is like, I didn't foresee that. Are you sure Luke's on the planet or whatever? They're like, whoa, it's all a future battle. Wow, that's so interesting. I've never thought about how important that is to the theme of Star Wars and just trying to get lost in the future. So, okay, this may be deviating just a hair,
No, go for it.
but it does play into even this scene because we've talked about this before. But this putting a whole new light on it for me. Um, do you think? Tell me what you think about this. If this is true or not. Do you think the Jedi at this point on the timeline? Because we've talked about how they're not necessarily. How do we put it before? Like we kind of had this impression before they were maybe getting arrogant and sort of deviating into somewhat of a failure. So I'm wondering because we talked about how maybe that's not necessarily the case, but I'm wondering maybe at this point in the timeline they have put too much emphasis on the future, trying to discern the future, and it's Qui-Gon's lesson that brings them back. You know what I mean? Like Yoda learns, like what you just said, like Yoda needs to learn, maybe stay out of the future so much and be more in the present that he comes to in episode 5. Is that one of the things that maybe the Jedi, I don't know if get wrong is the right word, but maybe the emphasis is too much on that in this era? You know what I mean? And Qui-Gon's kind of the one who's like, no, guys, look right in front of you, the living force right now, mindful in the present, which Yoda seems to pick up by the time we get to episode 5. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, is that part of the reason they get arrogant and clouded? Maybe something like that?
Yeah, so there are two. Just to clarify, there are two main faults that the Jedi have that Lucas talks about: blindness and arrogance. So so it is right to say that they are blind and arrogant, and as we just find out in this movie, they are blind. And Yoda says later on, um, Obi-Wan says his Padawans become arrogant, and Yoda says, "Yes, a flaw more and more common among Jedi, even the older, more experienced ones." So that's Yoda throwing it back at Obi-Wan, saying, "Hey, you're not so great yourself. Watch it."
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
um,
Where'd that come from,
yeah.
Obi-Wan?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so this is an ancient story, and this is the story of Mufasa and Scar in Lion King, right? This is the leader, the ruling power gets old and blind, and the villain takes advantage of that and stabs them in the back without them, sneaks up on them and stabs them in the back without them knowing. So this is the story of I'm gonna get the names wrong. Horus and Osiris is an Egyptian myth that almost follows the prequels exactly.
Hmm.
This
Interesting.
the story of it's the king how always has an evil brother that's in this case it's like the politicians of the Senate. The king being the
Huh.
Jedi, the noble ruler Mufasa, there's always a scar that's gonna sneak in there and betray you. And so it's Set, that's what it is. So Osiris or it's either Horus or Osiris. I always get them confused because they're father sons.
Oh.
It's Luke and Anakin. So
Hmm.
I think it's Osiris is betrayed by his brother Set, which coincidentally is where we get the word Satan. That was derived from that ancient Egyptian name. Anyway, so he's blindsided. He's become old and blind, and he's become, yeah, kind of complacent and very comfortable in their power and in his
Comfortable.
power.
Yep.
Yeah, and arrogant and blind to any threat that's there. And so the story of the son redeeming the father and giving him back the power that he lost because he was blind. It's the son's job to see where his father couldn't, and to see through the lies
Wow.
and see through the fog.
Hmm.
So yes, I feel like I'm stumbling around in the fog myself, and I think I forgot to answer your question. So sorry, very succinctly. What was the question again? What is the yeah? Sorry, what specifically was it? Because I kind of got lost on a tangent there.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering if that is maybe, how can I phrase it? Maybe the problem with the Jedi at this era, you know? Like, because
Yes, it
before
is.
we kind of needed to correct ourselves a little bit how we thought they were failures, or I don't remember how we phrased it. It was like they just kept failing. But now I'm wondering, just in light of what you just said, like, is it more of just a misplaced emphasis? Like they're placing their too much emphasis into the future,
Right.
whereas they need to, and that's sort of like the
Right.
way
Okay.
Palpatine
Right.
gets
Right. I
in.
remember
You
your
know what I
question.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what
Yeah.
he exploits. Instead of like the
Yes.
Jedi being like failures and jerks like we originally thought. You know what I mean? How it's different there, but
Yeah, that's right. So
yeah.
yeah, Lucas specifically starts talking about the Jedi's failures in this film. The last movie was all, I mean, that's why I spent so much time on the Jedi Temple image we talked about, and just the introduction of the Jedi's. They're introduced to us in that movie, and they're maintained in this light throughout the whole movie that they're at the top. They're the highest good. And so there was a lot of people who don't like how the Jedi treat Anakin, and they think that was part of the Jedi's problem is that it starts in episode 1, and Lucas seems to be conveying the idea that the Jedi are right in episode 1 to do what they do, and they're actually being very smart, and the dark side hasn't started to cloud things yet. But what happens in the movie is the Sith are introduced, and so by the time we get to this movie, then yes, now the Jedi have become blinded and they've become arrogant. They're still they're still the best we got. You know, they're still the good guys, and we shouldn't. And again, we've talked about this. The way I think I phrased it was, it's the prequels isn't the story of the Jedi's failure; it's the story of Sidious's success, where the Jedi don't so much do anything wrong. It's just that Sith does the Sith do what they're trying to do just so much better. The Jedi just aren't. At this point, I guess that their powers are diminished. They're not operating at 100%, but they're still aiming in the right direction. It's just that the Sith are just better equipped at this point. They're doing their job better. So yes, the Jedi do fail. They do make mistakes, but it's not. But the Jedi Order itself isn't a failure. The Jedi themselves aren't a cautionary tale, and that we shouldn't have an order like this. We shouldn't have space wizards who take kids and train them, whatever. That Lucas isn't setting them up as this. This warning of like don't turn into that. No, he consistently talked about the Jedi as being the good, the greatest good, and he doesn't single out Qui-Gon or any specific Jedi as being the one who got it right and the other Jedi get it wrong. That's where I think a lot of the narrative kind of got lost around Qui-Gon, is that Lucas never singles out Qui-Gon as being the best of the Jedi. He just, when he does single out Qui-Gon, he just says he's very different, he's very weird, he's very a maverick. But whenever George talks about Jedi, he talks about them collectively, and he always talks about them in a positive light. So I do think it's a mistake to say that the Jedi are just this. It's the Jedi get corrupt and they fail Anakin, they fail the Republic. So in that sense, yes, and I think this movie is important to point out. Yes, even though we were singing the Jedi's praises in the last movie, they do have very specific flaws in this movie. That the seeds were maybe planted in the last movie, but now they come to light. And so when Yoda says in Revenge of the Sith, "Failed I have," he's not wrong to say that he failed, but it doesn't mean he's this It doesn't mean that the Jedi are the bad guys in any way.
Right. Yeah, because I remember in episode 1, my approach to it was always like, oh, look how much of a jerk these guys are, particularly Mace Windu, and they're just so cruel to Anakin, and they're just so, mean to him. But I needed to be humbled a little bit in that and realize like, oh no, they are seeing a threat, or maybe not a threat, but a danger in Anakin that's real. Like Anakin's arrogant. He's not wanting to admit his failures. And they're calling him out on that. That was a revelation to me.
Yeah, it was for me too.
And just saying like, oh man, okay, maybe no, they're not necessarily being jerks here. They're trying to do the right thing. And like you said, they were correct and pointing that out in Anakin. And here, episode 2, it's like, okay, they're not necessarily corrupt, but they've started to dabble in the future a little bit more, maybe, or put their hopes into it. And then, some pride has slipped in, Whereas we're not necessarily a corrupt institution who's full of a bunch of jerks like we kind of thought before. And when I say we, I guess I mean me.
Well, just it's a part of the fan conversation. I think a lot of us have thought that. I thought that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that fair to say? Do you think that's a fair kind of summary? Okay.
I think so.
Because I want to make sure that I'm viewing this in the right lens that George wanted us to view in. It's like, okay, there's some danger by putting too much emphasis on the future that Palpatine comes in and exploits.
Right. Sorry, that's the other part of your question I didn't really address. But yes. So again, that's how we get to Yoda's teaching to Luke. So it's interesting to hear how Yoda teaches Obi-Wan, how he teaches Anakin, and how his tune changes when he gets to Obi-Wan or gets to Luke in Empire Strikes Back, where it says he's like, don't rush into things because of what you see in the future. That's totally different from where the Jedi, and this is why Yoda learns in a big way that he had the wrong idea, because because the Sith, the reason that Palpatine gets to the point where he gets to sit back in the chair and look into the future is because he was active in the moment while the Jedi weren't looking. And again, as some of the Jedi were just sitting around there, we try to dispel this idea the Jedi are just off in their high tower, not doing anything and being useless and being lazy. No, they were. They just were looking in the wrong place. They were active. They were doing the right thing. Again, they're aiming in the right way. They're aiming in the right direction. They just can't. They're just operating at this point in this movie, at least. They're operating at like 50%, 70%, whatever, less than they could. And so the Sith are just, again, it's not so much the Jedi. It's not so much the Jedi's mess up. It's that the Sith are just at the top of their game. The Sith are just being too clever. They're too good. So yes, the idea that the future is not where you need to put your focus is a lesson that Luke learns through Yoda, who had to learn it. Luke gets to kind of, he doesn't listen to Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, but Yoda was able to was offering Luke advice that he learned the hard way. But eventually Luke did have to learn the hard way as well, but Luke finally listens, as Yoda eventually did too.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think by the time we get to Yoda in episode 5, he has to learn a lot of lessons, right? Like war doesn't make one great. Like we see him make the mistake. It's not necessarily like the Jedi. Yeah, before like I was thinking, oh, they were just arrogant and corrupt. And then, obviously there is some arrogance, right? And
Lucas definitely says they're arrogant. So yeah, we can definitely say they're blind and arrogant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting too how Palpatine, and we've talked about this before, Palpatine kind of puts them in a tough spot where they got to try and figure out the lesser of evils, to do the best good. And Yoda learns that later. I think how he learns that war wasn't the right answer, taking up power and trying to stop it that way. And we see that in Empire Strikes Back. So it's just interesting, all these lessons that he's got to learn. But I don't know. That's another thing I guess we'll come to. But it's interesting to me that I think the way I'm seeing it now, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Jedi here, they've been comfortable for 1,000 years because, there's been no war for 1,000 years. And the Republic's, like Padme said, the Republic's strategy has been diplomacy, right? Democracy. And George mentioned that in the commentary that they haven't needed fighting. They just needed a police force here and there with the Jedi. So they get comfortable, and Palpatine, kind of starts pushing them in places they haven't been in 1,000 years, and they got to figure out, what do we do? We've never been in this situation before. We've never had a full-scale galaxy-wide war on our hands. What do we do? And I don't know. It just seems like maybe they weren't necessarily corrupt, but they were pushed into a new territory And I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm not even sure I'm contributing anything.
No,
But I'm
it's
just thinking
good.
like, whoa,
Oh, of
this is
course you are.
changing my whole view of everything, and I'm just spewing stuff right now.
Yeah. No, well, it's fun.
Yeah.
This is the fun of it. This is why we love this, because it just, yeah, we can go and go and, oh, that connects to this and that connects to this. I think, a big one quick thing. It's kind of we kind of finished talking about, but I want to tie the bow on it. That I think a big reason people don't, at least you and I both didn't really understand the Jedi the way Lucas was portraying them, was because I think a lot of times people didn't think. People were dismissing episode 1 as like it's not necessary. Anakin's story starts in episode 2. That's when he starts to fall to the dark side, and Revenge of the Sith is where it actually happens. And a lot of people were complaining that even in Revenge of the Sith, it felt like his fall was too quick. But if you look at, as we saw in episode 1, it starts there. Anakin's darkness is there from the get go. It just doesn't reveal. We don't see it as that yet, because he's just a little kid. He's just a kid being quirky and funny, and again, he shouldn't want, when he says like, I'm a person, my name is Anakin, he gets really dark and intense there when Padme calls him a slave. Like, yes, he shouldn't like that in the moment, but that mentality stays with him, and so whenever anyone doubts, whenever anyone puts him down, he won't accept it, and that gets worse and worse and worse. And so I think that's why we thought the Jedi were being a bully to Anakin in episode 1 for the longest time. We realized, like, no, they see there is a legitimate problem with this kid, and the Jedi were smart enough to see it. We're the ones who didn't see it. We were dumb. We didn't see and Qui-Gon, and actually everyone's like, oh, Qui-Gon was right there. Like, actually, Qui-Gon made a really dangerous decision there in pushing for Anakin. Eventually it was the right idea, but the Jedi it's not like the Jedi were awful to push back against that. It's like, that's a lot, dude. Like, Qui-Gon was being very radical and very, very dangerous in that mode right there. So I think that's a big reason why we've haven't traced the Jedi's storyline accurately, is because we haven't been tracing the main character storyline accurately through the prequels. But another, what was you talked about that? You were talking about, Yoda. Another thing I wanted to, I might disagree with you on the Yoda thing. I think Yoda, well, maybe I don't know what to say that I disagree with you. I think, let me see if this is what you were saying. I think it sounded like you were saying Yoda's attitude on war changes a little bit in Empire Strikes Back, where he's like, well, war's not making great. And I don't know if that's necessarily a lesson that he learns, because Yoda is very upset about the war from the get-go. Like, at the end of this movie, he's not happy about it. And throughout Clone Wars,
Right.
Yoda talks about how much he doesn't like the war. So I think it's
Right.
not so much I disagree. I think you know this. I think I just wanted to clarify that the Jedi, and George Lucas has made this clear, that the Jedi never wanted to be in the war. Like you said, they were kind of just forced into a corner where they had to be in there, had to take part. But yes, the idea that the Jedi have always never liked war. So I think that's a consistent thing in Yoda, actually. I think, is that he wants to avoid a war if at all possible. And I think so I don't know if the war makes one great thing is more of a reflection on something he learned over the course of the prequels, more just reiterating something that the Jedi have always believed, which is that war is not going to lead anywhere good. But and there was one other thing you brought up. I had so much fun watching you, like, when you get into it, and like you said, you're rambling, but it was great. It was fun to see you have all these ideas. I was trying to keep up with them, and I forgot, I think, the last one you mentioned. But anyway,
Sorry.
no, you're good. It was fun.
Fun. Yeah.
We can I kind of, whatever. I'm at a dead end. I can't remember where we're going from there. We can keep going with
That's
with
okay.
the
We can
scene
just
if
keep
you
going.
want. But
This is just totally mind blowing to me, and it's changing everything, which I love. So, so I'm just kind of spewing out things like, "Whoa, I can't believe that."
yeah, it's definitely not
Yep.
the last time we'll talk about these things. So we'll get into it again. We'll be reminded of it later. But
Okay, can I ask a question again? Okay, so you had a great question. I want to know your answer to it. What is the dark side?
yeah,
If you're not ready for that question, we can postpone it. But
let's talk about because we've kind of been putting it off for a while. I do want to let's just, I'll preface this by saying I don't have a definitive answer yet. This is not like this is gospel. This is from Lucas, but I have been researching it. I've been trying to keep myself informed on it enough that I think we can have a discussion about it. So, what is the dark side? So, the way I like to think of the Force, there's an image that I like to use that's been helpful for me, is that imagine the Force is a liquid. And so you are surrounded by this liquid. As Obi-Wan says, it surrounds us and binds us and penetrates us. So it's like you're like imagine you're in a pond, and so you're in, and the water is just any open space the water is kind of taking up. So there's rocks and trees and fish and everything, or not trees, but like plants, like, underwater little pieces of grass or whatever. Just kind of like your regular kind of swampy pond in a nature area. And so the water is covering everything and touching everything in there. And so there's this kind of old story of the fish who's like, what is water? Like the fish don't know what water is because they're completely surrounded by it. So they're not aware of it. So when everything's still, when there's no disturbance in the water, you're not really aware of it. It's very easy to miss the fact that if you're a fish, that there's water there. Or just imagine it's just you're like submerged in the water, and let's imagine you can breathe it. So you don't really feel it. But then as soon as that water is disturbed, as soon as something moves, as soon as like a stone drops, or if you're in the water, if you like move your hand through the water, all of a sudden you feel pressure, you feel movement, you feel a force there. And you can kind of realize, wait a second, I can direct this water into certain areas. There's more energy, right? Things can move. And so it's like at that same pond, a still pond, completely quiet. If you take that same amount of water and funnel it through a hose and through a nozzle, you have a pressure washer, right? And there are pressure washers you can cut your fingers off if you're not careful. Like that water, when it's funneled into a certain area, when it's put under a lot of pressure into a specific place, that water can now do a lot of damage, and it can move a lot. And so I think the way to think of the Jedi and the Sith is that they have both woken up to the fact that they're surrounded by this, they're in water, and they figured out, if I move it, I can shape it, I can direct it into certain areas, then I can affect my environment around me for my benefit and for the benefit of others, or if you're a Sith, just for my benefit. So,
and there is some skill, right? Just throw that in there.
Yes.
Right? Like not everything can. You have to be some skilled with the midichlorians. Yep. We established that in episode 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So not just everybody could, but yeah.
Well, again, like water, like
too,
it takes a lot of force to push water into, like a baby's not gonna, move, like not gonna splash around water that much, but a big jacked guy, you can push, when someone does a cannonball, right? The larger they are, the bigger waves they're gonna make. So yeah, there is something about you inherently that can affect the environment around you. So there's skill, but there's talent involved there. So I think that's how I like to think about, like, how does the Force connect things, how we move it. And so the dark side is when you're using this energy around you selfishly. This is the common, George says this all the time, and he said this a lot more and more recently, I think, is because I think he's trying to hammer home the takeaway, even though they was stated a little more subtly in the movies, but post movies he's brought up this idea more and more often of selflessness versus selfishness. And so this is another reason why I think the Force being used in terms of seeing the future is a little more helpful, because it's very cinematic to move things with your mind and have a lightsaber battle. But at the end of the day, I think the moral that Lucas is pushing forward is that when you use if you have gifts, if you have talents, if you can manipulate your environment in some unique way, if you do that selfishly, in the short term you'll feel great, you'll have power, some great things could happen for you. You might move up the ladder, whatever ladder it is you're trying to climb, you might get there quicker. But eventually it'll destroy the world around, the people around you, your environment, and yourself. And so the dark side, I think, is, we've talked about that there's different aspects of the Force. There's the cosmic force and the living force, sometimes called the personal force. Lucas sometimes uses that word, but instead of living. But the dark side and the light side, or the good side. Lucas doesn't really use the word light side very much. I think he tends to call it the good side. I've heard him say light side. Just initially he called it the good side and the dark side, and it doesn't matter. Same thing. That's the motivation to use the Force. That's your heart behind it. Like, I can manipulate this my environment to what end? And so I think the dark side, again, Lucas always is talking about selflessness and selfishness as big themes in these movies. And I think his idea of the light side and the dark side are his, a physical manifestation of that, or not manifestation, but a physical example, a physical picture of those ideas. And that's another reason why the Force isn't always it's not always helpful to think of the Force as just moving things around. It's using like seeing into the future because I want to just take over the galaxy, or seeing into the future because I want to protect the galaxy. That's Yoda and Sidious's motivation. So I don't know if that's the direction you wanted to go with that, but that's the first initial ideas I have of that, of what the difference between dark side and light side.
Let me ask you this. Because I tried researching this, and I mean, to be fair, I didn't give it like weeks of study, but it's very difficult to find what George defines the Force as. I mean, he's kind of vague. He doesn't really say a lot. But recently, he came out and said, I think at the Cannes Film Festival, he talked about that. He said, yeah, like I'm trying to remember how he said it exactly, but he said something along the lines of like, yeah, no one really understands the Force. Like I understand it, but no one else really does. And the way Disney has it, they've gone away from the way I understand the Force. But I'm kind of like, oh, George, you gotta let us know what the Force is, man. Like, because there's all this debate on this, and because I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. There's so much debate on it, like among fans and amongst people, which is I think why there's so much problems, or one of the problems with some of the Disney stuff is like, what is it? We all have different interpretations of it. So I'm curious to know, because I've heard George say, I'm gonna mess up this quote, but I think he said, balance of the Force means no dark side. It's not a dark and light coexisting per se.
Okay, I do have an answer for this. Yeah.
Okay, and so, but I'm curious on this, in kind of like what you're saying. Have you heard from George that there is almost like two sides to the Force, or is the dark side using? How can I phrase this? Like, is the dark side of the Force a perversion of the Force? You know what I mean?
I got what you're going. I see where you're going.
Like, there's not necessarily like two forces, if you will. I know that's not a helpful way of portraying that.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha.
But because there's some debate. Like a lot of fans will say, oh, well, there's almost like two forces. There's this dark side force and there's this light side force. But in my understanding is it seems like, well, no, there's just the Force, and you can either submit to it or you pervert it, So I don't know maybe I'm way off base on that, but I'm wondering if you've heard anything, or if you can help us think through that, or how to understand this, or what. So
yeah, so this is something that I definitely got wrong, and it's a small adjustment, but it has big ramifications. So balance in the Force means there is no more Sith. It doesn't mean there's no more dark side. I thought that for the longest time. And George said I have a quote here. It says, "The dark side is always there. It is experienced daily by people. It's like a huge cancer, alive, festering, both a reminder of the moral state and at the same time symptom and symbol of a very sick society." So I have a couple more quotes here about that.
Like totally apart from the Sith?
Yeah, so the problem
like
with
if there's no Sith, that's still the case?
Yeah, so the idea is like the dark side is always there, but it is not the cause it's Lucas's view of the world where you're never going to there's evil in the world. We can't get rid of it. We can suppress it, but it's always going to come back and rear its ugly head. What you want to do is keep that in its place. You want to keep that to a minimal, like when you see it, stamp it out. When you see a weed, pull it out, don't just don't let it overgrow. And so the problem with the Sith is that they are causing the dark side to grow. The dark side, the Force is again, it's the metaphor. It's life. It's a Jedi there to promote the flourishing of life and to keep. It's generated by. If the Force is generated by all living things, then the worst thing that can happen to the Force is death. Like living things dying, because that stops generating the Force. The problem with the Sith is that they use the Force to bolster themselves and their own needs, and their own desires, at the expense of everyone else, and so then everyone else starts to die. Like the galaxy starts dying, like literally and metaphorically. And so the way the Force goes out of balance is that there's too much death. There's not enough things generating the living Force.
Interesting.
And so the Jedi are promoting life. And so, that's why the ultimate weapon of the Sith is the Death Star. The exact opposite of what the Force is about. Is, when Obi-Wan feels a huge disturbance in the Force, why is there a disturbance in the Force? Because a lot of death just happened. Like millions and millions of people, billions of people died on Alderaan. So that So yeah, the problem is the chosen one. The prophecy is to destroy the Sith. That's what you're meant to destroy the Sith, not destroy the dark side. You're meant to. The
Interesting.
dark side is
Okay.
always there, and so
Hmm.
and balance doesn't necessarily mean that the dark side and the light side are equal. It just means that there is a balance between them. It's like what would you say, balancing your checkbook, or you want to keep things in the positive. You don't want to keep things, or balancing your bank account, or what's another way of thinking about it? Sorry, I'm just this part I'm kind of thinking off the fly here, but yeah, the idea is that the dark side just you can't get rid of it, but you need to keep it in its place. We're always going to encounter evil in human beings and evil in yourself, and this is Anakin's problem, is that he has this darkness in him as a kid. He didn't choose that. No one, no one taught him that. He just always had that. He is his mission, his goal, or as it should, what his goal should be, is to keep that part of him in control. And this is the idea that Jedi do experience emotions, that Jedi are allowed to experience emotions, but they can't let them bubble up, and you can't let all those weeds take over the lawn. You got to pull those weeds when they come up. You're never going to get rid of them entirely. So you just can't let that you can't let your emotions control you. That leads you to the dark side. So that, and I'm starting to ramble, so I'll stop. But that
No. That's
Lucas has
great.
been very clear that it's balance means getting rid of the Sith, but the dark side is never going to go away.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm going to find a couple more quotes on that, because I don't want to
please do.
just take my word for it. This might take me a while though, so feel free to ramble, because I got to find them.
That's okay, because I have a lot of thoughts on this. Wow, that's great. So I'm just thinking, like, okay, in a balanced Jedi, and we've talked about this a little bit, but never in full depth. Like, Luke Skywalker seems to me a balanced Jedi because he's not afraid of emotion. You know what I mean? Like, his emotions in Return of the Jedi, it seems like it is his love of his father that causes him to have balance and reject the dark side. Whereas it seems like or maybe I should just say the Sith, but it seems like in the prequels, the Jedi are almost so afraid of the dark side that they've almost become detached. They don't allow any kind of emotion. I mean, there's truth there, right? Like, and George talks about this, how, like, if it's when you become too attached that you start getting selfish, you start becoming afraid, and you kind of make things an idol, But it seems to me like one of the themes of Star Wars is that Luke is realizing, like, well, not all emotion is bad, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Oh man, what am I trying to say? Because it seems like the Jedi in the prequels are almost like, no, almost too far to avoid the dark side. Like, no, we don't want to have any kind of attachment. We don't want to have any kind of even possibility of that happening. But I don't know. Does that make sense? I'm not even sure that's correct thinking, but
yeah,
I'm just trying to piece this all together in my head and reconcile this between, like, the Jedi, the prequel, and Luke Skywalker, and his victory in the end. You know what I mean? Because I don't see any of the Jedi in the prequels doing what Luke did. You know what I mean? Like, that seems very unique. But I don't know. And that's not to downplay the Jedi. I'm just wondering if they're just missing a few things. You know what I mean? But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Or what have you heard George say?
Yeah, it's more like what I haven't heard George say. It's more like I haven't really heard him ever speak on those ideas that much, where what you said did make sense, and that is, again, an idea that I had, and kind of still have. It's just I don't hear Lucas talking a whole lot about the Jedi not having not access, or not taking advantage of the right emotions and the right attachments, or that's not the right way to say that, but that Luke does that better. That's not to say that that's not what he's, intending. It could just mean that he's never brought it up. So I don't have a lot of concretized ideas in my head right now about all that, about what Lucas said, because this has been one of the reasons you can understand, for those of you who don't know, I've been putting off this discussion about the Force, because it's so tricky, and there's so many. And as George said, rightly so, he's the only one who understands it, and so I'm trying hard to figure it out. But yeah, we made some progress, I think, on it, and with this. And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
so yeah, when it comes to, I mean, Lucas is very, very. He seems to be very, very clear that attachments, the way he defines that, is bad. So let's
Right.
see. I have
Like
and that,
obsession,
yes,
selfish,
exactly.
fearful. Yeah.
Yeah, and he never there's this idea that, the Jedi are not allowed to love, and I'm not saying you think that, but I'm saying that's an idea that's been around for a while. The
Right.
Jedi are not supposed to have emotions. And I think later on in this movie, in the script itself, it kind of dispels that whole myth. But yeah, but the idea that Luke, yeah, that it's the love of his father and all that, and even that is an idea that I got from Dave Filoni, not necessarily George. And so even that could be like Luke's whole motivation, um, of love of his father is what causes him to, become the Jedi, that the world, that the universe, galaxy needed to be back. Um, I don't know. It's tricky. I haven't quite gotten. I don't. I don't think I have any good answers or any
Mm.
good things to
That's
talk
okay.
about in that
That's
case.
okay.
The one
Yeah.
thing
That's
I
fine.
just, the idea that it's Return of the Jedi. It's not the arrival of the Jedi. That Luke is
Right.
bringing back something that the Jedi had, the Jedi were before. It's not, Luke isn't the first one to do this, I don't
Right.
think. So whatever that is exactly, I don't think, I'll leave it off with a hunch, with a guess. And make very
Yeah.
clear this is not what anything I've heard directly from Lucas, but I think that whatever Luke's success is it's a return to a form for the Jedi. It's not unique in that he's the first one to try it this way, or the first one to implement the Force, or to try giving into the right emotions as opposed to the wrong ones. I'm suspecting that's not the case. I don't really, but yeah, I don't really have a lot of
That's okay.
stuff in my mind right now that I could back that up with. So we'll definitely have to get to that. I mean, obviously, we're going to get to Return of the Jedi at some point, so we'll have to get to
Yeah.
it by that point. But for now, I don't know. My brain's kind of all over the place right now, so I might have to go back to we might have to go back to the script just for my sake, because I'm kind of
No, that's fine.
rambling
And
and scrambling in my brain.
no, I took us
Yeah.
off on that trail, but and I think it's relevant
That's a
to
good one.
Attack of the
That's a good one.
Clones
Yeah.
because I'm just trying to get a feel, and we've talked about this Phantom Menace too. But now that we're kind of in this, I appreciated how you pointed us back in Phantom, and while we were talking about Phantom Menace, like, well, the Jedi here are okay. We haven't really seen a lot of problems yet with the Jedi. Episode 1, Episode 2, we're starting to get into that. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around it now that we're here, and kind of like, what is the dark side? How is it clouding them? And where are they at? Because I think, like, this is all new to me, like the sense of like, oh man, maybe they're dabbling a little too much with the future. Maybe they're a little bit on the arrogant side now, And I'm wondering if this is part of it too, where it's like, okay, like the Jedi aren't wrong. I'm wondering, this is totally theory. I'm just speaking out loud, kind of asking you. The Jedi almost seem like the Pharisees in dealing with Jesus, at this point,
Yeah.
where it's
I
like
can see that.
they have a lot of extra rules that maybe weren't originally part of Jedi codes to keep from falling to the dark side. You know what I mean? So it's like, for example, and I think emotion may be part of that, where it's like it's not wrong for a Jedi to love. It's not wrong for a Jedi to have compassion, and even like we talked about with Episode 1, even some fear. It's just, what do you do with those emotions? But here I'm wondering, like, oh, did the Jedi step a little bit further and say, well, no, okay, yeah, you can feel love, but we're going to take it one step further, and to prevent you from getting any kind of attachment, you just really can't have anything. You know what I mean? Where it's like building a fence around, how can I phrase that? Like, it's building extra rules that they're kind of, getting almost dogmatic, like what Palpatine says. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a bit too far. Like, they're building hedges around that don't need to be built. Is that a fair statement?
See,
Or is this just part of the we don't know yet?
I think, well, see, what you're saying. I've thought that my whole life, pretty much, of being a Star Wars fan. And the problem is, I have yet to really see that supported by what Lucas has talked about. And I don't quite see it in the movies now that I look at them again. Like, the rule of attachment, I think Lucas sees that as a valid rule. I think, and I don't think I've never heard Lucas say anything about the Jedi, that their rules, their institution, like that, what the pressures they put on, specifically Anakin in this movie is wrong, and that it's actually Anakin's. Yeah, that the Jedi are always just portrayed as the highest good. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone
Mm-hmm.
needs to be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Jedi, but
Mm-hmm.
if you are going to be a Jedi, there's nothing wrong with how they operate. I think is that's what also that's so far that's the impression I'm getting. But yeah, but that's not a definitive. That's not I haven't found a
Yeah.
quote where Lucas explicitly talks about that. It's just
Yeah, I
tricky
haven't
because
either.
that's something it's you brought up the Bible earlier. It's like it's one of those cases where it's something we wish Lucas talked about more, but Lucas doesn't seem to be interested to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. And it's like there's many
Yeah.
things we would
Yeah.
love the Bible to tell us, but the Bible doesn't really doesn't care to mention it. So
Uh-huh.
right now I haven't seen anything that um that seems to indicate that Lucas has the idea that the Jedi's teachings went too far or went overboard in any way. It's more just that it's more. Well, actually, no. There's a quote. I remember this. Where he says that it's Anakin's. It is Anakin's failure. That he's the one who messed up, and the Jedi didn't set him up for failure. That it was Palpatine who did that. That it was Sidious who manipulated. It made it seem. Sidious made it seem like the Jedi were being impossible and giving him bad standards, or at least not so. Because the Jedi, obviously, they're asking him to spy on Palpatine and break the Jedi code. Like there's things that the Jedi do that are, they're human. Well, not in Yoda's case, but they're fallible. They're they have flaws, but they're not to blame. I guess Lucas never blames the Jedi. He does say that they make mistakes. He says that they're blind and arrogant for sure, especially in this movie. But I'm not sure that I'm not at this point willing to say that Luke's victory is that he kind of set the Jedi rules back into where they should be. The Jedi ideas, and I found a couple more quotes on that idea of the dark side and the Sith and the
Yeah.
separation between those two.
I'd love to hear him. Absolutely.
These are fairly new. These are from both of the archive books. This is one of them is from the original trilogy one was from the prequel ones. So he says, you have the light side and the dark side in you. Your job as a human being is to try to keep those things in balance so you don't go all over the dark side. It's not possible to go all the way over to the light side. So people struggle to keep on the light side because it's harder. That's what a Jedi is. A Jedi is someone that's pushing the light side as far as they can. And then he's talked about the Sith. The Sith practice the dark side and are way out of balance. The Jedi aren't as much out of balance because they're the light side of the Force. They still have the bad side of the Force in them, but they keep it in check. It's always there, so it can always erupt if you let your guard down. So
that's helpful.
Yeah, just again, the idea that the dark side isn't something that needs to be extinguished to bring the Force back into balance or to be a good Jedi, to be a good person. It doesn't mean you get rid of the evil inside of you. It means that you keep it in check, that you are the master of it. You're not letting this monster inside of you take over.
That's cool. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Oh man, I got so many thoughts on this, but because I'm trying to reconcile what I grew up with, but
it's hard.
I want to be faithful what George is saying, because my hunch is I'm like, wow, did we misinterpret this so badly?
Yeah, no, that's my hunch
my
too.
whole life.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just because I'm curious on that, and I'm sorry I keep bringing it up, but I think it's relevant, to so much of these movies of just like what are we trying to learn here, and where does because I think you're right. The Jedi are not the bad guys here, and they're not some corrupt, nasty organization like we kind of used to think of them as, which has been helpful for me. But yeah, I'm just trying to process this through, and it plays a lot in this movie in particular with Anakin's struggle with what do I do with this love I feel for Padme? How do I move forward to this? What do I do with my mom? I love her, but now I hate the fact that these guys killed her. I mean, like it's just now I'm afraid, and so I'm kind of wrestling through with Anakin here because I just like, what do I do with all these emotions? How are we supposed to feel? And it's interesting because George doesn't necessarily say, like you said, black and white. But you get Yoda saying, hey, just let go. Don't be afraid to lose those you love. And don't have any attachments. And Palpatine's like, no, take control. Save her. I'll save her with you. and he just like, wait. And you can see why Anakin's so confused.
I do
And
know that Lucas does
yeah.
side with Yoda in episode 3. That everything Yoda says there, that Anakin is Lucas signs off on as good. It's just hard to sometimes. I think it's hard for us to understand where Lucas's head is at and how he defines certain words, which can make it difficult. Sorry, I have one more quote. I think maybe kind of
Go for it. Go for
puts
it.
it a little more specifically, and this is actually came out during I think the press for this movie for Attack of the Clones. So this is we get Lucas's brain here as he's thinking about this specific movie. But he says, I wanted to have this mythological footing because I was basing the films on the idea that the Force has two sides, the good side, the evil side, and they both need to be there. Most religions are built on that, whether it's called yin and yang, God and the devil. Everything is built on the push-pull tension created by two sides of the equation. Right from the very beginning, that was the key issue in Star Wars. So that's the end of the quote.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
Wow.
so there's this idea that there's this constant tension, and so you need to make sure. He's talking about which way do you want the balance to go, selfishness or selflessness. You got to make sure that keep the balance positive, right? Don't let the other side get too much traction. That's what the Sith do. The Sith, feed it too much.
Wow, that's so interesting. And part of it too, I think, just a confession is, I operate out of a Christian mindset versus like something more of like Buddhist, and I think George is really influenced by that Buddhist thought in particular. Because in Christian thought, it's like, no, I mean, you have Satan and you have Jesus. They're not equals, right? Like Jesus is the light. There's no evil in him, and he will destroy all evil, and that will be the end result. Whereas I'm not sure a Buddhist would say that. It's much more of this yin yang. They are equals. You will have darkness, you will have light. So it's a very different mindset for me, I think too.
Yeah.
And I can easily see where I'm putting my own mindset onto this. Like, well, the Force means conquering all evil. There is no more evil. Like, we're done.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, and
George
a lot of people
quite thinking
put
that
there. Well, it's interesting because he's called himself a Methodist Buddhist, kind of jokingly, where he's because there's ideas he's pulling from all kinds of sources. So that there's some Buddhism in there, but there's also a lot of Christian ideas, and there's a lot of just ancient ideas there's like Greek philosophy, and there's all kinds of sources in there. But yeah, I think that's a good call. Is that this seems to be more of this particular aspect of the Force seems to be more Buddhist influenced than maybe another religion, whether Christian or otherwise. But yeah, this was it's so funny seeing you wrestle through this because this is exactly what I was going through when we were talking during Phantom Menace. I was discovering all these things. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, I'm like, wow, wow, poor Nathan. He's like, he doesn't know who he's dealing with. He's dealing with an idiot who doesn't know anything about the Force right now.
Oh,
he's so confused,
good, man. Yeah,
but
it's okay.
and it's and again this isn't a quote, but this is sort of like a description of something he did say. So in 1997, Lucas said that the more detail he articulated about the Force and how it works, the more it took away from its core meaning, at least to his way of thinking. So unfortunately, he did try to keep it pretty mysterious, and so and that's just, and as he talked about now, that's a problem for anyone who wants to make Star Wars now, is that the guy who has all the answers isn't very forthcoming with them. You like to keep it mysterious, and so if you want to tell a story that involves the Force, it's kind of up to your interpretation to a large degree. But we'll try and get as close as we can. I mean, I've already come a long way from where I was originally. So that idea of just it's not the dark side that needs to go away; it's the Sith that needs to go away. Like that was a big
that's
shift for
huge.
me. I mean, it's a small it's a small change in grammar, a small change in word choice, but it's a big change in terms of the ramifications that it has for the story, and especially for Anakin's role as the chosen one. So.
Yeah, man. And I just feel like it's so critical to Star Wars because you get so many stories that deals with that. Like you look at Ventress, who came back from the dark side,
right?
In the Clone Wars, and she's talking about how you need both, and then you get, this, like we've been talking about with Luke Skywalker. It's like, well, does he dabble in both? I don't know. We can talk about that when we get to Return of the Jedi, but
yeah,
is that balance to be able to use both and not just give over? There's so many questions, but I just want to be faithful in interpreting the Jedi here, because I don't want to be like, like I had for years, and be like, oh, the Jedi, you guys made so many stupid mistakes, and you guys were just so blind and corrupt. And again, some of that's right, but some of it's not, so it's like, oh man, I got to just be Like I want to know so bad. Like, how do I interpret this? So I just keep pushing it because it just plays through so many things. Like, where are the Jedi at fault? Where's Anakin at fault? Where's Padme at fault? Where's Luke at fault? Where are they doing the
Exactly.
right thing? You know. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh man,
It's hard. And this also plays into, something that was frustrating for me the first time I heard about it. When Lucas started working on, Episode 7 before he eventually sold the company, but he was preparing to do a sequel trilogy. And when I first heard that there was I found that out later that he was working on it, but originally I heard there was a sequel trilogy. I was like, "What?" And, how could there be, evil's gone, right? The dark side has been defeated. So, like, how could there be more story to tell? And now it's makes sense to me now. I was like, "Oh, well, Lucas wasn't saying that there's no more conflicts to be had. He was saying that the Sith were gone." And so whatever the sequel trilogy was gonna be, um, in both forms, the Sith didn't, when Force Awakens came out, like, the First Order, it's not the Empire. Kylo Ren is not a Sith, strictly. He is the dark side. It's the dark side was gaining power again, but the Sith weren't there. But that rubbed me wrong when I first heard that. I was like, what? Why the dark side should be gone? There shouldn't be any of this happening, because I had this
uh
idea that the balance meant the dark side goes away.
yeah,
And so and George has talked about. I don't like it when people, say, like, "Well, this is what Lucas's sequel trilogy would have been. This is what we would have gotten." Like, he changes his mind so much. Like, there's no
yeah,
there Han Solo had green skin and gills at one point, and, Luke was a girl. Like,
yeah,
there's so he changes his mind so many times. Like, who knows what the movies would look like by the time they finally ended up on screen. But, early ideas were, which he talks about in the archive books, I think, is that Darth Maul would have come back, but he wouldn't have been a Sith. He would have been like leading, like, this kind of force of gangsters, kind of like we see him do in Clone Wars and Rebels, or not Rebels, yeah, Clone Wars. So like, sort of like how Ahsoka is no longer a Jedi, Darth Maul would no longer be a Sith, but he would come back. And so that always, like, what, that doesn't make sense to me. But now it kind of falls in place where I see that Lucas's idea that it's the Sith that go away, but the dark side is always there, and so there's always the opportunity for more evil to come down the pipeline later. So that's been really helpful to me, kind of reconcile, like, of stories after Return of the Jedi. It's like where there could still be more conflict. It's like, okay, that the door is open for that. Before, my interpretation of it closed it off to me, and I thought, no, this is wrong. This shouldn't be the case. So
yeah. That's helpful. And there's some debate on that too, because everyone was saying, well, the story of Rey, at least the final story they ended up with, makes her the new chosen one. And then we were talking about how Lucas had mentioned with his sequel treatment, he was going to make Leia the chosen one. So it's like, wait a minute.
yeah, that quote.
How does this all play out?
I've lost a lot of sleep over that quote. Don't even get me started
I
on
know.
that one. I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Again, I'm like, a lot of times he's loose with his words. I'm hoping he's just not
Yeah.
really being
Yeah.
careful there. But if he is mean that exactly the way we think it means, it's like, well, not only that, he says, turns out Leia is the chosen one. I think, and it almost implies, like, over the course of the whole story, I was like, what? So he could
Yeah.
have changed.
I
Who
know.
knows? It's kind of like,
We don't need to go down
yeah,
that, but
exactly.
yeah. Whew. Yeah, because it's like, well, and just this whole thing is changing my whole perspective, because it's like, well, if the Sith are gone, and that is what Anakin's whole purpose was to eliminate the Sith and bring balance, not eliminate the dark side, it leaves room for some stories after Episode 6, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you can still have Anakin be the chosen one, like there's no more Sith, right?
Yes.
And then maybe you can have a movie or a sequel trilogy that's dealing with all the questions we have. Like, well, what do we do? I thought the Sith were gone, but no, there's this dark side thing. Yeah. But anyway, okay. So I know I really want to get back to the movie here. Thank you so much for doing this, because I need to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is so critical to understanding, especially Episode 2. So another question built upon that: Does Palpatine? And maybe George just didn't speak on it, but is he causing the dark side to do this to the Jedi, or is the Force doing it? You know what I mean? Like, is he the one using the dark side to cloud everything, or is it just the dark side doing it itself? You know what I mean?
I might need a little more.
Yeah, I guess, like, because Yoda says the dark side clouds everything, and then at the end he talks about how the shroud of the dark side has fallen. Is that Palpatine doing that? Like, is he manipulating the Force to blind them? Or is it just a natural consequence, like the Force is just doing that naturally by the rise of the Sith? You know what I mean? Like, is it the Force doing it, or Palpatine doing it?
I think it's Palpatine doing it, I think, because the dark side, is taking over at the same time as Sidious is taking power. So as he gains power, the dark side gets stronger. Um, so I think he's definitely driving it. I guess I think I know what you're saying. So it's not like the Force is this is not like a natural cycle where like the Force is now like, oh, now the dark side's gaining power, and so that allows Sidious to take certain um, steps where he wouldn't be able to normally. I think it's Sidious actively making decisions that cause the dark side to grow, because the Jedi are,
Okay.
are also actively keeping the peace and doing what is good, and so I think um, left to its own devices, the Force it has the Jedi to cultivate life and to keep it going and to keep it generating and getting you know onwards and upwards. So I think you'd have to have some sort of agency from another outside source in order to start to mitigate that. I don't think it would naturally. Again, this is very speculative, so I don't take any of this as gospel. But I think that's the impression we're getting. Because
Okay.
again, I don't think it's an accident that as we see Sidious gain power, that's also in the dark side gains power. I don't think that's coincidental. I think it's Sidious is the one driving that.
So it's almost like
that's my guess.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It almost seems like the Force is sort of a victim rather than this is the sovereign will of the Force kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Well, that's where it gets tricky, because the Force has a will. There
Yeah.
is, and I've heard Lucas say that the Force is a force for good, um, but then at the top, well, there's this dark aspect to it, or side to it, or however you want to use. So that's something that's really tricky. That's something I really don't have an answer for you there. I don't know what that means. I don't know exactly what the nature of the Force is in terms of the morality of, like, is the Force trying to. I want to say it does, because like it created Anakin as a way to balance itself back out again. Like it's
Right.
that was all the Force. That was no one's. At least Lucas originally had the idea that Sidious manipulated that, but now he's retracted that, and his idea is that the Force, the midichlorians, the wills. The reason they're called the wills is that they are the will of the Force, so they have a motivation. The wills have a motivation, and so it seems to be that their motivation is good, or at least their motivation is that there's a proper balance, that life flourishes. Whatever level of good morality that is. Obviously it's good, but it may not be like they want. It may not be as specific as we want Sidious dead. It could just be as general as more life. The more life there is, the more the Force is, more powerful the Force is. So we want that.
Which the Force
but
would be working towards.
yeah, it seems. Yeah, it's like yeah. I think. Yeah, I hesitate.
I know,
I don't want
right?
to, because like I don't want to create any more confusion more than I already have in my brain. So yeah, I don't have a lot of answers about that, but it seems like the general idea is that the Force is generally a force for good, or at least whatever's behind it. The wills are trying to set it in the right spot. It's just that there are adversaries who are trying to knock it down. The Sith.
Yeah,
So.
and it seems like obviously this is all played out as part of the plan from the Sovereign Force. Like I guess you could say, knew this was coming and had a plan for it because it doesn't like being out of balance.
Yeah,
Or this is
how aware is the Force of what's happening? Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky.
Okay,
I don't know.
That's okay.
I don't know,
no
man.
worries. I'm just curious. So.
We're in uncharted territories right here. So
that's all right. Well, and a large part of that is George. He didn't tell us these things. So it's not. Like you said, he left it a lot of mystery, and it's driving me nuts. I don't like mystery.
Yeah, I know either.
Well, I want to know these things.
That's the thing, is he left his breadcrumbs that we can kind of piece together to figure out the mystery, but he doesn't go out there and state exactly. Sometimes he does, but a lot of things we would like him to say, he doesn't. So, but we'll get there. We'll get like I said, we'll get as close as we can. That's been my goal, is to just get as close as I can. However close,
Gotcha.
I mean, it may be a million miles away, or sometimes we can get it right up to it and we can nail it down. But whoever that distance is, we'll try and close that gap.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Because that is our goal. We want this. We want to learn what George had in mind. This isn't Nathan's perspective. This isn't Josiah's perspective. This is what did George have for us. We're trying to exegete Star Wars, but
yes, exactly.
I'm not sure George knew all the time. And then, like you said, he changed things, and then he just liked the mystery of it too. So
yeah, and some
some
of it might just we discover an arc of his mind where it changes over the course of the time 40 years he made these movies. So yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Nice. Well, thank you for indulging me, because this is just driving me nuts, and I feel like it's so critical, especially for episode 2. So I think it's good for me to get this set early so I can try to see the rest of the film through this lens, instead of my old school lens that I just always thought. So, yeah, so it was not a waste, but
No,
maybe
no,
all
not at
you
all.
fans out
That's fun.
there are like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous.
No,
So sorry
no,
if that's you.
I think it's fascinating. Well, this is fun for you and me to talk about. I don't, and I'm glad that you have. I'm glad. Well, you've already made me think a lot about things I hadn't thought about before. So
Vice
I'm glad
versa.
that we're having the conversation because again, you always come back with really great ideas that just make me giving you more questions to answer. So it's good.
That's right.
And
Nothing's easy around here with me.
yeah, no, no. Well, it's a challenge. It's a fun challenge because
Yeah.
there's stuff where I'm like, well, that makes sense to me, but then I don't have all the same. We both have different questions for certain things, and so the stuff that I bump into, you don't necessarily, and the stuff that you bump into, I never thought of before. So I think it's a good compliment. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll have to keep going. And you're right.
Okay.
We gotta talk about at some point. We gotta chip away at that
Yep.
force, that stupid force, that really annoying
Yeah.
idea of concept, and try and nail that down as we go. Hopefully, by the time we finish Return of the Jedi, we'll have some working
That's right.
theory of what
We'll
the
get
force
it.
is. Yeah,
We'll finally understand it and have to go back and redo the entire series
yeah,
because we screwed up everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's see if we can get these guys out of Palpatine's office, huh?
Yes, let's try and get out. That's one of those podcasts where we only make it through one scene.
Yeah,
But,
we did
that's
30
fine.
seconds of move screen time.
Yeah, it's all good.
Oh,
Okay.
but it's so good. I love this stuff. It's so much fun
Yeah.
to think about and just,
Mhm.
speculate. Star Wars, part of the fun about being a Star Wars fan is speculating. So that's just that's part of the nature of it. So, okay, my bad. Here we go. Back to the scene.
Yeah, let's see. What did I talk about? Okay, so just quick thing again, like kind of housekeeping stuff. The Jedi, Mace Windu, as you pointed out, says that they're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Again, setting up this idea of like war is a bad outcome. Like it's so sad knowing where they end up. Like they end up having to become soldiers at the end. This guy who says this, we're keepers of the peace. At the end of the movie, he's leading troops into battle. So it's like it shows you how far they've had to compromise. So that's again, I like this. The counterpoint is being the balance, or not in the way of the Force, but just we start with a character in one spot, and then at the end of the movie, they're in a completely other spot, completely other different place. It's just great drama, great writing, and it's also again Lucas plants the seeds here. He's just getting the audience prepped. He's priming them for the story he's about to tell them.
I like that word compromise you use. That's a good way of thinking about it, I think, because they are forced to compromise versus like they were just arrogant. You know what I mean? I mean, like I said, that is part of it, but it seems to me like they were forced into some of these things. Yeah. Yes. Versus like this is just their corruption showing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Totally different. Mm-hmm. So
exactly.
I appreciate that. Compromise is a good term. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like they weren't just going to let the galaxy be taken over. They weren't going to let the separatists just destroy all the battle droids, just kill everyone on every planet. They're going to have to step in. That they're conscious, their morality wouldn't let them not do that. It's just unfortunate. The only way they could do it effectively, the only way they can keep the peace at this point is to create an army and lead it, or not create an army, but lead the army that's been created for them. And so that's the really tricky predicament that Sidious has put them in, and so they have to compromise on what they'd like to do in order to do what they need to do. So that's a good point. Yeah, compromise is a good word. We should keep using that one. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a good
I
way
like
to
that.
think about it. Yeah.
It's helpful. Yeah. Well done, sir.
Well, thank you. I was just, random word that popped in my head, but yeah, it works. Occasionally I ramble long enough. Some good's got to come out of it.
Right.
What else? Oh, so this is another quote from Lucas. This is just kind of talking about the Jedi's relationship to the Republic and to the Senate, and how that hierarchy, how much authority the Jedi have. Are they in charge? Is the Senate in charge? What's that like? So this is from Star Wars: The Annotated Screenplays from 1998. They released the original screenplays, and there were a lot of interviews and notes from Lucas there. But he says, "I didn't want Vader." This is it's not going to sound related, but then eventually it'll tie back to what we were talking about. He says, "I didn't want Vader to be all-powerful. In the first film, it was very easy to make him some kind of superhero, but I decided not to do that. In fact, he is working for the Emperor, and he has to do the Emperor's bidding. You will see at some point in the future that the Jedi have the same relationship to the Republic. They're like public servants. They're like marshals or policemen. They basically do what they're told to do. They're not independent agents who can do whatever they want." And so I like, again, that's pertinent to this scene because we see the Jedi and the politicians talking to each other, figuring out what their strategy is going to be to try and keep the Republic from falling apart. And it's also, I think it's helpful for. I know I recently encountered um, there was a reaction video to the prequels. People on YouTube are watching. I like watching those because it's fun to see people, again, turn off my fan brain and see what these people who have known nothing, what they walk away with. And it's always so different from what I see as a fan. Where they were very upset with the Jedi, and I'd heard this objection before, but I kind of forgot about it. But that the Jedi were like, why didn't they just free Shmi? Why didn't they take Shmi with her? Like, why can't Anakin have his mom? Why can't Shmi have her own little apartment in the Jedi Temple or close by in Coruscant? Like, why couldn't they take her? And why did he? Why is it just Anakin? Why did Qui-Gon stop there? He's a Jedi. Watto's not going to intimidate him. And the idea is that the Jedi, it's like a policeman from. I'm in Colorado right now, so it's like a Colorado policeman. Ends up in China, and it's like and decides, so well, I have the authority to take, like, he has no jurisdiction over there. Like there's nothing you do. That's a big no. There'd be a million problems with that. And so
that's a good point.
The fact, the Jedi can't do whatever they want to do. They're there to serve the Republic, and where the Republic doesn't exist, the Jedi don't have the power.
They're bound by the law.
And influence. And even though, of course, Qui-Gon tried to free Shmi the only way he could, without causing a problem. But he couldn't, and so the rules of the Republic, of course, didn't exist out there. Didn't work. So that's one example of how the Jedi's jurisdiction kind of comes into play here. And then, of course, bring it back to this scene, the fact that the Jedi are not soldiers. They can't just, and they're not going to tell the Chancellor what to do. They're not going to exercise any kind of authority. Like as we see later in this movie, there's Palpatine, Palpatine's in there, but it's Mace Windu and Yoda kind of overlooking that Senate meeting where they decide to create the army. It's no mistake that the Jedi are there watching, and they don't have a voice. They're not there. They don't get to have a say in it. They're just they're just there waiting to see what their fate is going to be. Because we serve the Republic, and so if the Republic votes on it, I guess we'll have to go with it. Like Mace Windu says, it is done then. They're not happy about it, but they're not there. They're not floating around their own little pod, saying, hey, we can't do this, and they don't really have a voice, and that's not really what they're supposed to do. So I think it's just good to have that view of what the Jedi and the Senate or the government's relationship is going into this movie, because there's a lot of, they both do things that the other one doesn't like.
And we'll see that with Obi-Wan, Revenge of the Sith, right? My allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's see what else we got here. Just Ben Dooku's brought up. We learned that this nobleman who has lost faith in the Republic that we heard about in the crawl, we find out that he used to be a Jedi. So it's our first time hearing about a former Jedi. That's a new concept for us. Again, emphasizing the idea that the Jedi are now weaker than they were 10 years ago. It's like, oh, now people are disagreeing with the Jedi and they're falling away from the Order. That's another sign of weakness. Another sign of they're not as effective as they could be. And it's just also a new piece of information we learned about Dooku. So I thought that was interesting. I never really kind of picked up on that before, that was a new idea at this point in the story, that the Jedi, that there are Jedi who disagree with what the Jedi are doing. That's another thing, is like people look at Dooku and Ahsoka, people who leave the Jedi Order and say, well, they were right to do that because the Jedi messed up and the Jedi are corrupt. It's like, well, the Jedi do make mistakes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who leaves the Jedi Order turns out to be a good person, like Ahsoka. In some cases, it's Dooku, and so between Dooku and and Mace Windu, I'd rather take Mace Windu, because Dooku didn't exactly turn out well. Just because you don't like what the Jedi are doing doesn't mean you're right in the story. Although at this point he could be, we don't know. We don't know he's a Sith until the end, like I said. But
yeah, great point. And talk about the mystery, right? He just brought up, like and we talked about that before. George is really good just throwing you in the middle of stuff. And it feels like that's exactly what happens here. Like the way this is portrayed, you feel like, oh, I should know who this Dooku guy is. Did I miss something from episode 1? And he just throws you right in.
Yeah. And it's also the first new character theme that we get in the movies when they start talking about Dooku, is Dooku's theme plays underneath all that. Which is also, I don't know if you know this. So John Williams worked on episode 2 and the second Harry Potter film. Those both released the same year in 2002. And they share musical themes, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the music that's playing during the Coruscant chase in this movie, the very the very kind of repetitive, kind of piercing those chords, very staccato.
Mm.
That sound, it's arranged differently, but that basic melody and structure, but it's the same song, just arranged differently. That shows up
Oh,
in a Quidditch match in Harry Potter. And
oh,
then
interesting.
Dooku's theme here, with I guess 1 or 2 notes, slight variation, is played in Harry Potter in Chamber of Secrets. As I think it's supposed to be Lucius Malfoy's theme, Draco's dad. So yeah, so it's just funny. Like I think, and he had also, no, it's not just those 2 movies. I think he did Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can. He did like 4 movies in the same year or something. So he was just really like pressed
Wow.
for, just stressed out writing music. So I'll forgive him that he reused a couple ideas. But I remember watching Harry Potter going like, what? This is Star Wars music. What's happening right now? And then
That's crazy.
I looked it up. I'm like, oh, it's true. I'm not the only one who noticed this.
Wow, I've never heard that before. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense if you're trying to crank out 4 movies in 1 year.
Yeah.
Woo!
I'm surprised he didn't
That's
do more. I
intense.
think that's like the only 2 examples I can think of, but I'm surprised there's not more at that case. But
Wow.
what else? Oh, I like that. Again, George is consistent in his portrayal of the characters. He uses the same characters to voice similar ideas. So once again, it's Mace Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi who underestimate the dark side, like they did in Episode 1. It's Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu who say, like, they said, well, the Sith have been extinct for millennium. I don't think they would have returned without us knowing. And at this point, they're going like, oh, Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He's not a murderer. He wouldn't do that. It's again, Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu are a picture of the Jedi's blindness in this case and their arrogance.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so George uses the same characters to voice a similar idea in both movies.
Wow, that's awesome. Nope, never picked that up. So cool, man. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I'm just kind of dominating the conversation here. I can keep going through notes, but do you have any? I don't want to keep you. I want to hear from you if you have anything to say.
Oh man, I'm just learning. This is great.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on this scene?
Just one really. George mentioned in the commentary, I think it was commentary, that he wanted to really show that Empire Strikes Back side of Yoda, that playful, more lighthearted, just kind of sweet, the sweet old man that he is. Episode 1, we didn't really get that. Episode 2, we'll see it more with the younglings coming up here, but you get a glimpse of that with his interaction with Padme here. Where he just says, warms my heart to see you alive, that kind of thing. You see that care side of Yoda. Yeah, so I appreciate that. Well, I like that. And that stuck out to me even when as a kid, when I saw this, like, oh, there's Yoda from Episode 5, just those interactions. It was kind of neat. Comes up here and made me think about it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do get to see that fun side. We get to see Yoda, the teacher, not just Yoda, the council member. We get to see Yoda, what he was like as a master, or what he's like in a very personal setting. Which you didn't see as much of in Phantom Menace. Yeah, it's true. Great point. And I also like his. I really like when Padme and the Loyalists come in that moment when he talks with Palpatine, with Padme. And then the next moment when Sidious starts to talk again, I love the blocking here in that scene, because so Palpatine's separate from the group. Everyone else goes to meet Padme and the Loyalist. And so the Jedi meet with those who are still wanting to protect the Republic, but the one who is actually trying to tear everything down, he's separate. He's off looking out the window, and so he's separate from the group. And so just visually, there's a divide here. There's a visual divide between this guy and everyone else. These are the people who are trying to save everything, even though he says he doesn't want to let the Republic split in two. That's exactly what he wants. And I just like that Lucas chose to have this separation for the rest of this scene. And they are at odds in this scene too, so they could also serve that function where Palpatine and Padme have different views on how to handle the situation of her being attempted assassination. But also there's more layers of that separation than even the characters are aware of. So I just like, again, visually blocking. It's kind of obvious if you're looking for it, but I like I just like to point that out, because it's not Lucas isn't just dealing with dialogue here. It's visual storytelling. He's a visual filmmaker, and so he's going to use color, contrasts, lighting, shadow, and composition to tell a story. And I just like the blocking. I don't talk about blocking that much, and so I just like to. It was a very overt use of it here, and I wanted to bring it up.
And how would you define blocking for all of us non movie buffs?
Yeah, so where the characters are arranged in the scene, where they walk to, where they stand, how they're situated, and this is, and also composition, just from the camera's perspective, is where things look from the perspective of the camera. So blocking is where the characters are standing, where the composition is what the camera sees. And so you could have the camera from Sidious's perspective and or Palpatine's perspective over his shoulder looking at them, but here, the way the camera's composed, there's a very clear divide between him and everyone else. And so you see, so the blocking adds to the composition. That's good. That's a good point. I should make a distinction between those two ideas.
Yeah,
But
that's cool. Yeah, I like that. It is interesting watching Palpatine here, because you just get the sense that he knows exactly what he's doing. Almost feels kind of slimy, in this whole scene. He's just waiting. He's just waiting his turn to speak. The kind of thing. He already knows what he's gonna do. It's just kind of, and you feel that, which is kind of just the way Ian McDiarmid acts that out, and the blocking of the scene. It's pretty cool. The other thing I think of is I appreciate here with Padme is the first little bit with the landing platform, we sort of see Padme from episode 1, right? She's kind of like, "Ooh, I'm not sure I should have done this. I'm a little, I don't know." But here it's like, here's episode 2 and 3 Padme. I think it's Count Dooku. She's, whoops, I just pulled my headphones out. She's just like, "Yep. No, whatever. This is Dooku." She's just that bold, straightforward Padme we get to know and love from episode 2 and 3 in the Clone Wars. I just kind of appreciate that. Because I think it's Mace Windu that comes up and is like, "Oh yeah, and our intelligence says it's the spice miners or whatever on Naboo," and she's like, "No, it's Dooku." We get to see that progression, and George talks about that, how episode 2 is like, these guys have come into their own in a sense. Like, yeah, they have some growing to do, but they have learned from episode 1. Anakin and Padme in particular are different now, and they're how did you put it? Sort of that come into your own idea. Like, Padme's a full senator now. She's been in politics for 10 years. Anakin is almost a Jedi. Like, they're not 2 little kids anymore. So, you see some of that here. I like that. It's like, oh, there's Padme. Yeah, as we know her.
Yeah, and it's just, to me, it's interesting. It's the obvious answer. And this might play into the Jedi being blinded, but if Padme, she's part of the Loyalist Committee, she's like the leader of that group of the people who are trying to keep the Republic together, and we have Dooku, who's the leader of the Separatists. Like, well, who would want the leader of the Loyalist movement's dead? It's like, maybe I don't know, maybe the guy who's in charge of the opposite ideology, the guy who wants everything to be separate. So it's just funny that the Jedi don't. It strikes me as a little odd or interesting that the Jedi don't, and immediately think, well, they explain why. He's like, well, he's a Jedi, he couldn't murder. So again, it's the Jedi being a little blinded and arrogant. Like, well, a Jedi can never stoop to that level. It's like, well, that Jedi got corrupted. The dark side is powerful, and it can get a hold of a Jedi and ruin him. And the fact that they don't see it. So I guess that I kind of just answered my own question. It's such an obvious answer to them that the Jedi. It's just so obvious that a Jedi could never do this. They won't even think of the obvious answer in this case, which is that it's Dooku. But Padme sees through that. She's not blinded in this case.
Yeah, which is kind of neat. And again, you can tell this is a Jedi that haven't had to deal with Sith for 1,000 years. Like, why would they assume he went to Sith? I mean, that doesn't, and logically that makes sense. Why would you assume that? Oh yeah, Dooku, because he left the Jedi, he's now a Sith Lord. I mean, like, they would never. It's just not even on the radar.
Yeah, he's just a political guy at this point. Yeah, he's just like, why would he murder people? He's just unhappy with the Republic, and frankly, we are not happy about it that much either. But we're not gonna leave the order. So yeah, that's a great call. Yeah. I also like this shot of Yoda looking at Palpatine, because we can see from Yoda's look that he doesn't trust Palpatine.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you to elaborate on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we learn later that Obi-Wan feels the same. Like, Palpatine's a politician. Like, it's my experience, they're only interested in funding their campaigns and all that. And so just all throughout the Clone Wars, we see at the beginning of the Clone War in this movie, and then through Revenge of the Sith, and of course during the TV show, we just see the Jedi's distrust of politics. So again, this kind of plays this idea that the Jedi aren't. It's not like the whole Republic is corrupt and the Jedi are a part of that. Their failing is different. Like, they're not happy with where the Republic is. They're not happy with the politicians doing things the way they are. And clearly Yoda doesn't trust, particularly Palpatine. Obi-Wan particularly doesn't trust Palpatine. But again, it's just they don't have the authority. The authority is not given them to deny the return of the king. Why did I say it that way? The authority is not given to you to deny the return of the king. I was like, well, as soon as I said that, I'm like, that sounds familiar. Um,
Yeah, wrong franchise.
authority is exactly. I've done that a couple of times already in this
Yeah.
podcast, but yeah, they don't have the authority to question it, but doesn't mean we don't get to see their opinion of it. And so it's clear that the Jedi are not happy about what's happening. They're not, you know, in their pride. I don't know, pride's also a word I'm not sure if I would apply to the Jedi. It's definitely blind and arrogance, slightly different, but they're close. They're pretty synonymous. But yeah, they're not plunging into this going like, yeah, it's not like they think Palpatine's this great guy and they're just completely blindsided, like, oh, he was a Sith. Oh no, we never saw that coming. Like they don't like him. They're suspicious of him. They just think he's a politician. The Jedi just don't like them. Mace Windu says, I think in an episode of Clone Wars, where he like, I'll leave the politics to you. Like that, I'm gonna go. It's clear that Mace Windu doesn't like politics. All the Jedi, every time we see them with politicians, it's clear we don't like what they're up to. We know that there's corruption. We know that there's greed. We saw what Dooku saw, but we're just not willing to jump ship. We're going to try and bail the ship out. We're not just going to try and just abandon ship. But so I just like that with this one look, this one shot from Yoda. It's like, what is there's something more. He's got some ulterior motive right here with the Padme, protection thing with the Jedi. It's like, why is he getting us involved in this? You can tell he's not happy about it, but not. He hasn't figured it out yet. He won't until next movie. But
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because Bale also mentions here, like, are you sure that's a good idea right now? Like, under the circumstances? And then, I mean, everybody's against this move right now. Padme, like, Chancellor, if I may comment, I do not believe, and, he finishes the sentence for her, but it's interesting that he just kind of plays the card and everyone's like, oh, okay, I guess we'll go along with it. And nobody really likes it. Yeah.
yeah, it's true. It's like, do we want Jedi? Like, Jedi are already kind of stretched thin and having troubles. Do we really want to get them involved in all this separatist stuff? Like that could, the Jedi don't want to be involved more in politics. The politicians don't want Jedi more involved in politics, and it's just, it's a tricky situation. And of course, it is a bad idea. It is, it leads to the war happening. But, yeah, it is. Anyway, I like the scene because I like we're just firmly establishing the differences between the Jedi and the conflict that the Jedi now have with the people they're supposed to be working well with, which are the politicians, and we see their weakness. We see both sides, corruption on one side, weakness on the other, and how that's just not gonna. Things don't bode well after seeing how these two sides kind of come together in this scene.
Yeah, boy. I was going to mention two things. One, I have a question for you about. I'll wait for that. First, I've never really noticed this before, but I like how formal the dialogue is here. Everyone criticizes George for his dialogue, but you get this sense it's really formal. Like Mace calls Padme "milady," and Palpatine says "Your Graces." It's sort of that like formal Shakespearean almost kind of feel. You get the sense these are the elites, these are the top dogs. It's not just the scoundrels of Tatooine. So it's kind of a nice touch. I didn't really notice until just now. Then the other thing, we had talked about this before. I can't remember if we've talked about it on air at the podcast, though, in episode 1. We might have, but just as a refresher, can you explain to us why Palpatine looks so old?
Yeah, so we've talked about Palpatine's age before in my weird, wanky little theory on that. But this is it's tricky. So I never caught this until someone had to point it out to me because it never occurred to me that Palpatine looks older in this movie than he does in Revenge of the Sith. People kind of were like, wait, why does he look younger now? And I never saw that. But I think again, talking about Lucas changing his mind. There's this part of the frustration that fans have with Disney was this idea that there wasn't a plan for the sequel trilogy. And Lucas has said that, he obviously did think things through, but he changed his plans up quite a bit. And so I think there's just too much of an impulse to go the exact opposite direction. Say that George Lucas had everything planned out, and Lucas has said like, no, I didn't. I changed my mind all the time, like on the day during filming and stuff. So obviously he thought things through, but not as much as I think people like to point out now, and just in retaliation to the Disney stuff. But so in this case, I think, and there's not a lot written on this, at least that I've found. So Ian McDiarmid in an interview, I think it might be part of the commentary, has talked about how his progression in this movie, makeup wise, seems to be trending towards like eventually I'll become that old, ancient face that we see in Return of the Jedi. or Empire Strikes Back. And so his eyes are a little bit more red in this movie, and his skin's a little more sallow. It's a little more wrinkled and unhealthy looking, and but it seemed I've never I haven't found this confirmed, so it could just be Lucas just changed his mind. He just didn't like the way the makeup looked, or maybe he did change his mind for Revenge of the Sith and decided that, oh, it's not going to be a natural aging process. It's going to be a reveal of a face that's underneath this false one that the Chancellor Palpatine has, but underneath it is the face of a Sith Lord. So at this point, yeah, I don't have I don't know exactly what Lucas's intentions were in this particular film with the makeup of Palpatine, especially since it seems to look different in Revenge of the Sith. But yeah, my for those who don't know, my theory that I this is gonna sound really like pat myself on the back. I don't even know how much of a theory it is because it seems to be backed up a lot by what Lucas has said and what people who've worked with him have said. I think that Sidious is way older than we think he is. I think Sidious is potentially, you know, thousands of years old, or 1,000 years old. I think he could have been, the Sith waiting over the last millennia could just have been just him, for all we know. Because yeah, I'm not gonna get into it. It's a really long discussion, but I do want to have that. We'll talk about that especially when we get to Return of the Jedi, and I do want to make a video
Yeah.
about that. I have like the script written out. I just need to record it and put it up on YouTube.
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm.
so I think the idea here is that his age is showing in some sense. Either maybe it's natural, maybe Sidious or Palpatine is supposed to be aging more than he normally would in 10 years from Phantom Menace,
Right.
or Lucas is kind of letting uh, that as maybe the idea that as Sidious's power is growing, that more Sithy side of him is coming through, even through the disguise of the Chancellor, and so that he's aging more quickly, or that age is just showing more, that part of the mask is sort of falling down. So but Lucas never really talked about it, so I don't really have a definitive answer of why exactly it looks that way, but I think it could be playing into this idea that um, Sidious isn't scarred by the lightning. It's actually ancient, wrinkled face. And so this might be the first. Lucas originally may have had the idea that this would be the first step towards that, instead of a reveal at the end in the middle of Revenge of the Sith, where it just all comes out at once. He may have originally thought of it as a more gradual process. But yeah, I haven't heard him say anything specifically about that. So again, in typical Josiah fashion, a very very long winded answer to your question, and the answer was I don't know. So that was a very unproductive cul-de-sac I just took us down. But
That's okay. I know
yeah.
we talked about it before, but I couldn't remember if it was on air. So no worries, no worries. That's okay. Other thing I was going to note or just note is that Palpatine, man, he just again, you can just tell he knows what he's doing. He specifically calls out Anakin and Obi-Wan, and he
That creepy
specifically is
smile too.
yeah, yeah. And even the last scene there of him, he just kind of looks at everybody as he walks away, like, yeah, how you gonna respond? Okay, I think I got this. Yeah, you just feel like he's in total control here. It's also interesting because you can feel his power already. Like, how many people disagree with him here on this move here? And Yoda's like, I don't know, but he gets it. He gets his way. So he's in control. He's got this power. Um, but I wanted to ask you on that, and maybe we should probably end on this. But why does Palpatine ask for Obi-Wan and Anakin? I have a theory, but I don't know why. Like, I don't know what George has to say. Do you know?
Yeah, this is a question I've asked myself, and I've tried to figure out. My goal is to find this out before we finish this movie, because I think there's an answer somewhere. Um, he definitely wants the larger picture, as you pointed out, is that he wants the Jedi to find the clones. He wants that all to be revealed. But specifically, Obi-Wan and Anakin, yeah, you could speculate and say, do we think that Palpatine wants Anakin and Padme to get together because he knows that's going to be a problem eventually down the road, or does he want to try to drive, or maybe he just wants to use Padme as a wedge to get Obi-Wan and Anakin to into conflict, with each other. Um, that I don't know if Palpatine's really like aware of that yet, that it's going to be Padme that's going to turn Anakin into Darth Vader. Who knows how aware Sidious is at this point of Anakin being a potential for his apprentice. But we do see him at least planting the seed in this movie, where he starts to feed Anakin's ego. We see that he's been doing that, and so it's not outside the realm of possibility, at least to my way of thinking, that Sidious could be using Padme to drive a wedge between Obi-Wan and Anakin, so that Anakin's a little more friendly with him, and he might have a little more influence over him. Because
Uh-huh.
Sidious has been interested in Anakin since the last movie as a
Right.
potential prospect for an apprentice. So, at the very
Uh-huh.
least, he wants Anakin to. He wants to test Anakin, see how much of the dark side how much trouble I can get him into, and see how powerful he can be. So, yeah, I'm assuming there's something going on there, but I don't. I think it's more Anakin driven. I don't think Palpatine really cares too much that it's Obi-Wan who finds the clones. I think it's more that he wants Anakin. He just wants to put Anakin under pressure and see how he reacts. Maybe. I haven't heard Lucas speak to that specifically though, but that's it seems to be, again, this is me just speculating using clues that Lucas gave us in the movie. So in a way, it's based off of what Lucas has said, but not necessarily in an interview, or he hasn't stated explicitly. I'm more just kind of piecing together what seems to be the story he's telling so far. But I'm hopeful. Hopefully, I'm going to find something. I have a feeling there's something out there where Lucas kind of talks about this, and I must have just missed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious, because that's my theory. Is that he's just trying to test Anakin. I mean, we in a few scenes from now, we definitely get that he's been grooming Anakin, kind of puffing up his pride. So, but we talked about earlier, like Palpatine's okay if Anakin dies, like he doesn't care. But if he ends up being the guy who he can manipulate and use, yeah, he's going to do it. But and it's interesting because I've heard this, that George, one of his live action TV shows that he was working on before Disney came into the picture was a little bit of history with Palpatine and how he fell to the dark side, and it was through a love story, and that's kind of been picked up on a lot of themes. Is just the attachment, gets you attached and afraid to lose that person. So that was always my theory, is that he was, he picked up on this connection. Because I mean, Anakin makes no secret that he's loved Padme forever. So I would assume someone like Palpatine would pick up on that pretty quick, but I don't, that's a theory. I don't know. So I was wondering if you had heard anything from George, but obviously I think the most plain answer is that he just needed to get his heroes involved. And this is how you get them involved, right? Like, you just need to get Anakin and Obi-Wan center stage again. This is how you do it. But I was just curious on if George had an in-universe explanation for that. So that was always my theory, like you said, but I was just curious. So
Yeah, we'll see. I have to. I'm working my way through the making of book of Attack of the Clones, the myth making, which I should have been done with it by now. Before we started the Phantom Menace conversations, I had read through the entire making of book for that one, and this one has been taking me a little bit longer. I've been busy, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's more on that specific relationship in there between Anakin and Palpatine, and how Palpatine, maybe why he's choosing him in this moment. Because yeah, you're right. Like, Palpatine, he's a Sith. He has no love for Anakin. He doesn't care if this guy lives, or he only cares about him if to the degree that he can use him as a tool to get his own success. So yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not that. But what the actual motivation is, we may not. We may be surprised if we do learn something from Lucas here. But yeah, I'll keep an eye out for that one. That's a good one.
Okay. Yeah, I was
But yeah,
curious.
I think that
Okay.
wraps up the scene, right? And we can
Yeah.
we're ready
We
to
did
move
it.
on
We
to our
got
main
through the first
exactly
major scene.
first scene. Yay.
Yeah.
No, it's good. I'm really glad we had that conversation though
Yeah, me
about
too.
the Force, because it is. I'm just glad I finally had some stuff to
Yeah.
bring to bear for that conversation, because for the longest time I just had nothing. But that revelation of the dark side and the Sith, or it's the dark side that needs to be dispensed with. No, it's the Sith that needs to go away. That was a big shift for me.
Yeah.
And also dealing with like the fact that the Force, there's so much of the future, and looking to the future is a big part of the Force and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of good nuggets in there, and trying
Oh,
to figure out
huge.
what is the dark side and what is all that. That's a we finally breached that topic and made some progress on
Yeah.
there. So that was a good discussion. I'm glad we detoured when we did, because I learned a lot through that. I even have more questions and more ideas to help explore it now. So thanks, man. That
Yeah.
was a
Thanks, man.
great detour you sent us on.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I learned a lot. So I'm grateful you found some answers. I never even drew that connection between the dark side and Sith. Like, two separate things. I always lumped them in the same. Like, oh, they're both just bad. You just need to get rid of them both.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I think in the same token, the light side and the Jedi aren't necessarily the same thing either.
yeah, right.
Han Solo,
Right.
Leia, the rebels, they're all part of the light side of the Force. They're just not, their manifestation. They're the good side too. They're doing well, and they're just not practicing Jedi. So
Yeah. Well, great discussion, man. I love it. I can't
Yeah, that
wait.
was fun.
Episode 2 is great. I want to get into it and learn all this and
yeah,
have my mind blown every single time again. This is so great. So yeah.
awesome, man.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it, and yeah, on to the next one.
On to the next scene where we get to introduce our heroes.
All right, that's it for this episode. Join us in the next one as we continue our series on Attack of the Clones. As always, thanks for listening, and on to the next one.